Welcome to today's session. This is the first in our 3-series webinar that we will be exploring work experience. So today I'm joined by the Careers and Enterprise Company's Director of Education, Nicola Hall, who will be joining me as we explore work experience, setting a new standard of work experience, and what employers need to know about what Nicola, not just the CC, but I think Nicola very much wholeheartedly is coining modern work experience that is set to support young people in 2025 and beyond. As we explore the session today, we'll be looking at how we are redesigning impactful future-ready work experience programmes, what modern work experience programmes really are, and then how we can support in terms of feeding placements into long-term talent pipelines and maximising the return on investment. In terms of setting the standard of what modern work experience looks like, we are going to spend a lot of this session with Nicola exploring the future, what modern work experience can look like, the changes we can make. I do just want to take a moment to set that into the context of today. So I just want to explore really briefly the Youth Voice Census 2024 key findings. We talk about today, this data was launched in September last year. The Youth Voice Census is currently open and taking submissions, insight and information. This data will be updated in September 2025. But what young people told us last year about what it was like to grow up in 2024 was very much around kind of anxiety, safety within their local areas, within their education environments, within the places that they were existing, where they were working, where they were studying, and where we were expecting them to access sports, leisure opportunities within their local area. That sense of safety, discrimination, rising cost of living and finance was directly leading young people to be more anxious in their day-to-day lives, but also more anxious about their future, anxious about making decisions in terms of where they might study next, what they might do, how they might ever possibly find a place to live and a place to work. And that anxiety, that sense of being unsure about the future has been something we have seen at least for the last 3 years in Youth Voice Census data, but what we continue to hear in terms of narratives, it really is in and around every discussion we're having with young people. Alongside that, the readiness for next steps has dropped for young people. They're less confident about their future choices, some of that anxiety and safety, but certainly conversations around finance and the cost of living were directly leading young people to consider whether they could continue to study on courses, whether they could continue to be an apprentice, whether perhaps if they had chosen to study at university, whether it was still financially a viable route for them to. They felt less sure about making those choices and less certain of what would be their next best step. It did then lead those young people to think more in line with traditional stereotypes in and around there too. So we saw a huge and very dramatic shift in young people wanting to explore engineering, particularly young women. We saw young women reverting back to some of those traditional roles for them in terms of childcare and healthcare, and we saw young men exploring or more likely to explore construction and engineering roles too. So in those times of kind of friction, challenge and sense of uncertainty for young people, they were more likely to revert back to what they felt safe or perhaps what their parents could guide them towards. They were less willing to take risks. Part of that was also down to a lack of opportunity. So for young people, careers education, whilst for some areas it had increased slightly for young people, actually opportunities to explore directly with employers, opportunity for enrichment and extracurricular activities were all down for young people. 1 in 10 young people didn't do anything outside of go to education. They were 10% less likely to join a sports club, 10% less likely to be part of a youth club, arts, media, social, all of those places outside of education where we hope young people will engage with people who are different from them and will grow and learn and develop their skills, were all reduced for young people. They were getting less opportunities to be social, to engage, and to test and flex skills and resilience in a slightly different way than they had before. We also saw that young people's perception of accessing quality work and quality opportunities was also down for young people. We'll talk about it a little more as we explore work experience, but for young people, just 1 in 10 thought they were good quality opportunities where they lived. What does that mean for work experience then as we explore it today? Just 36% of young people in the Youth Voice census who were in secondary school at the time of completing the census had access work experience. Opportunities to work with employers and to explore work experience with employers also typically for most groups decreases as they go through further education and higher education too. Most young people will explore that 2-week work experience as a given and as a promise, but actually only 36% of those young people had. Then as young people move into college, sixth form or university, for the most part that reduces. We do see some exceptions to that, particularly for university courses or college courses that might be health and social care related, education, or perhaps media related too. But for the most part, if you don't get work experience in secondary school, you are unlikely to ever catch up. What we also saw is how unprepared young people in secondary school felt for that traditional 2-week work experience. 58% of young people who were offered work experience in secondary school undertook it. For the most part, the most common reasons for that were that young people just didn't feel prepared. They weren't ready to leave the education system to go and be in a different place, in a different environment. Their anxiety around immersing themselves in that place of work was really high. And then in addition, the secondary source of not completing that was because it was in something they just didn't want to do. It was an area, it was perhaps an opportunity that the school just always had. They had very limited access to opportunities, or they ended up just working with a parent or an uncle in something that they just knew they had no interest in the future. Confidence was low for young people. Just 36% of young people thought they understood the skills employers are looking for or might want. And what we know is that for the most part, young people don't think that employers want to hire them. They don't necessarily think they have the skills employers are looking for. And the skills that they think employers are looking for are those skills that are most often developed in a workplace. So problem solving, communication skills, being able to show your initiative. For most young people who have got less engagement outside of the classroom, they really struggle to be able to show or to find ways to show employers that they had any of that experience at all. We are really seeing the impacts of COVID-19 on how young people are engaging less socially and less in volunteering, extracurricular activities, really having an impact then on the confidence and the skills, those typical places we might expect young people to talk about, being able to be a good team player, being able to problem solve, being able to show their initiative, and people were really feeling that lack opportunity for them too. And for young people, in terms of their confidence, almost half of all groups and all age group believe that a lack of work experience is currently holding them back from being able to find work. It is the biggest reason young people who are currently seeking work, it's the biggest barrier that group think is stopping them get there. They just think that actually they have got no way of showing their skills to employers. They've got no way of having anything interesting about them on their CV, is their perception. But also for young people who are currently in education, it's that lack of work experience, that lack of understanding work and being able to connect it to an employer that they believe will hold them back. It is a huge source of anxiety for those groups. And then when we think about the access to employers, the organisations that young people see and hear of in their local area, they are struggling to connect that to jobs they might do, or struggling to be able to connect that to opportunities that will come to life for them. Just 10% of young people think they can access quality work where they live. And from that access point of view too, most young people don't believe that they'll be able to find work, not just where they live, but overall. overall, but also when we think about access to work experience in particular, 51% of young people had support to find work experience. 25% had no help at all in terms of being able to find it. And it is one of those issues for young people that they wish could be fixed, putting the onus on them to go out and find an employer when they don't know who they are, they don't know how to approach them, expecting them to kind of pick up the phone, or being like hammered by their parents to take a paper CV into local stores and ask for work experience is absolutely terrifying. It's also then not really how it works anymore, and young people are tending to disengage with those moments and those processes. Young people do really value work experience when they think that someone can help connect them to it, when they believe that it will be valuable, it will be interesting for them. They absolutely are in agreement that it will help them build useful skills. It will help them build networks and contacts, particularly those from free school meal backgrounds, particularly those from marginalised and unrepresented groups. That building networks and contacts, they are most likely to agree or strongly agree. And for them, it's one of the only ways they'll be able to do that. They really value that sense of understanding what it feels like to be at work and build experience that can get them a job. When we asked young people about how work experience could be improved, there was a lot around help to apply, practice interviews and assessments. There was a lot around how we could mix and match opportunities. And actually a lot of what we're hearing here, Nicola will cover in the vision for modern work experience, but more frequent, less complicated opportunities for young people to engage with a lot of different employers and be able to really immerse themselves in different workplaces so they really understand what then might be right for them, or if nothing else, what might be wrong for them too. We also asked young people about how they believe employers can help develop their skills. Whilst this isn't directly related to work experience, I wanted to bring it in today too, because actually for a lot of young people, they really value employers' opinion. They wish they could spend more time with employers. They wish that employers could be a bit more patient, and they wish that employers were part of teaching and learning skills. They are taught a lot of different things by teachers within their learning environments. Actually, it's employers that they would really value hearing from, and it's employers that they really value being able to make sense of transferable skills and understanding. And if we could close some of those gaps and some of those loops, I think we would, one, as employers, have more fruitful kind of discussions and moments with young people where we were able to get closer to potential and closer able to understanding the skill and development needs they have. But from young people's perspective, I think they find it really valuable in terms of understanding where employers are at and why skills are so important. As we talk about employers, I wanted to draw out the Good Youth Employment Benchmark findings from 2024 too. So we hear frequently every year in the Youth Voice Census, we hear from young people on a range of issues, not just work experience, but it is always a huge part of what we hear from young people. We have been working on the Good Youth Employment Benchmark. It will launch for its third year in September this year, but actually we work with employers to benchmark the activities they undertake against Explore, which are early careers exploration opportunities, experience, so work experience and experience of work, and employment opportunities too. I've just pulled out for a moment the experience findings that we had for the Good Youth Employment Benchmark this year. And employers are in our network doing the absolute most to connect to young people. They are supporting and working in all of the ways possible. A lot of them are using providers or support networks to be able to help them be engaged with young people from a work experience perspective. But those employers that are running work experience programs, over half are offering kind of a buddy or a mentor program. 70% offer an induction session, so a pre-phone call or a pre-Zoom call with that young people, so they can really understand what day one's going to look like, what reception looks like, and how they can welcome, engage, who they're going to meet, bios of the staff that they're going to have on board too. So that pre and on programme support for work experience is becoming increasingly better, and it's really improving young people's experience. What we found, though, is that the post-work experience support could be improved to provide better outcomes. Just 8% of employers offer the opportunity to engage with their organisation again at the end of work experience, and just 8% provide a reference for young people who have undertaken a work experience placement. When we talk about a reference, that is anything for young people in relation to a reflection log, the skills, the 3 things we thought you were good at this week. It leaves young people at the very end of that placement on a bit of a cliff edge. They've met an employer perhaps for the very first time, and they don't quite know what's going to happen next, or what's going or kind of what to do next with that information that they've been able to provide. We're going to talk later in today's session and open up for some questions too as to how we might rectify some of that activity, how we might support to better connect networks, to kind of better commit to driving that good talent pipeline. But I just wanted to end on that point too. The Good Youth Employment Benchmark is completed by members of Youth Employment UK who are on a journey to drive good quality work, and still only 8% are engaging with that organisation. That tells me that there is still more work to do in terms of evidence and evaluation. Before we dig into that, though, I want to bring on screen and in person Nicola Hall, Director of Education at the Careers and Enterprise Company, to talk more about the vision for modern work experience. Before we start building that pipeline, let's look at how we can build work experience to be a better experience for young people overall.
Thanks, Lauren. And thank you so much for setting the scene so incredibly well for the work that I'm going to speak about now. I think Lauren has done a sterling job of outlining some of the incredibly sticky challenges that exist with work experience in England. And I think it's not unreasonable to remind ourselves that, you know, I did 2 weeks of work experience more than 40 years ago, and nothing in that 40 years has changed about the way work experience is approached in England. And yet the world of work is dramatically different to the world of work 40 years ago. And I think we have an opportunity to really start to think about how we approach work experience in a completely different way to support young people with some of the issues that Lauren has set the scene with today. So this particular government have got 2 national strategic priorities when it comes to the development of careers provision in England. And the first of those is a strong commitment to the continued improvement of careers. And they are expecting that to happen through schools working towards something, and colleges working towards something called the Gatsby benchmarks. The Gatsby benchmarks set out a world-class framework for careers guidance for young people, and work experience and workplace experiences are baked into those benchmarks as a fundamental part of what should be offered to young people. Benchmark 6 in particular focuses on workplace experiences, and for the very first time Gatsby have outlined a definition of how they are meaningful, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The second commitment in the manifesto from this government was to prepare for a modern work experience guarantee, and that commitment was to make sure that by the end of this parliamentary term, all young people in England in schools pre-16, I'm talking about now, so I'm not today speaking about the policy for post-16, that will come later down the line, but pre-16, all young people in any institution in England should be able to access 2 weeks worth of high quality work experience. So next slide, please. So I just want to outline for you how that is going to be laid out for the school system to work towards. So this particular slide is the words of the Department for Education, not Nicola Hall. The rest of the slides are mine, but these are their words. And this week we expect new statutory guidance for schools to be released, which will set out this direction of travel for work experience for the future. It's really important, though, that I let you know at this stage that this is an ambition. This is not yet policy and is only being defined for schools in the context of, please start thinking about preparing for and readying your school in order to be able to offer this commitment for young people as part of a longer term ambition overall. There is a very increasingly acute understanding on behalf of the government and others that both employers and schools need a significant lead time and preparation to be able to make systemic changes to the system of work experience in England. So we're laying the foundations at this stage. So essentially the sentence 2 weeks worth of work experience is what we need to focus on. And the word worth is the most important word in that sentence, because that doesn't mean a student will come out of school and go on one placement for 2 weeks in a block, which is traditionally how we would have thought through the process of work experience placements. We know that around about 72% of children in English schools at the moment experience some form of work experience by the end of year 10. The majority of that is traditional 1 week block placements. Now, we absolutely should not be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's critical that where young people are accessing placements, we just support them to make them of better quality. But there are still swathes of gaps, as Lauren explained, where there are young people not accessing the workplace at all. So fundamentally, the new approach to modern experience will focus on young people being able to access multiple targeted and variable experiences of the workplace, which total 10 days across their whole educational journey. And the government are expecting that to be broken down into 5 days worth in year 7 to 9 and 5 days worth in year 10 or 11. So essentially, the real key to this policy statement, particularly for employers, is flexibility, and for schools as well. So in some schools, notionally, a model of 1 week placement in year 10 might work for the majority of students. In fact, I'm probably less bothered about the majority of students and more bothered about the 15% of students in that cohort that don't go anywhere at all because they can't access the workplace financially, or they're terrified or not ready, or they don't know where their meal is coming from when they're there on a lunchtime, or behaviourally, they're just not in the right place to be able to go. Hundreds of reasons that we could sit and list today on this particular call. We are starting to see models being tested and developed around the country that show how different approaches can be taken for different cohorts of young people to improve access and break down barriers to the equity of access for workplace experiences overall. So next slide, please. So for the first time, the Department for Education have started to outline what the purpose of modern work experience is. And I think if we went around the call today, we'd all have a different reason why somebody should go on work experience. Often those reasons are, well, you know, it was great. Work experience teaches young people how to get to work on time. So my background is that of a head teacher. I ran 2 secondary schools in the northwest of England for many years, and I was pretty clear with my learners that they were expected to come to school on time, and they were expected to be punctual to their lessons. They didn't need to go to work for a week to learn out how to be punctual to something. And there are many, many reasons like that that can be trotted out as to why different people think that young people should go on work experience. But really, the purpose is now being defined for us. Modern work experience will help young people to make more informed choices about their options, particularly their options for transition. So young people choose their GCSE subjects right now with no exposure to the workplace at all. So it's a really great idea to give them to start earlier, essentially. It's really key work experience to help young people improve their career readiness overall and their employability, their readiness to join employers like yourselves at the point at which they are ready to make that transition. And to be able to do that, what they need is multiple variable and targeted experiences which are progressive all the way through their educational journey. Next slide, please. So what should a programme do of modern work experience? First and foremost, it should really prioritise young people who are missing out and provide targeted support for young people that do not access traditional placements. So more than 2/3 of traditional work experience at the moment in England is facilitated by parents. Well, that's great, isn't it? If you're a parent who's got the social network or the industrial capital to be able to organise those placements for your young person. In fact, what we're actually doing is doubling down on disadvantage for young people by taking that approach overall. We can see that in around 300 schools in England at the moment who are operating a different model of school organised layered interventions and access to the workplace, we can see those equity gaps close dramatically, because schools are able to target and support learners to go to places which will open doors for them and give them a line of sight to their futures that they're not necessarily able to achieve on their own, as set out in the introduction. We're really keen, or the Department of Education are really keen, that modern work experience includes experiences that are employer-led in their design, that are responsive to you as a community of employers and industrialists, that respond to local skills gaps and needs, and that enable local growth as well. And that's a long-term ambition when we think about the design of different experiences to inspire young people. It's really key that experiences should enable meaningful relationships between employers and young people so that they can really start to build and think about and articulate a skills portfolio. And to do that, we really think they should start early. Young people say all the time, not just to us at CEC, but commonly in surveys, youth voice census, other avenues where they have a voice, that they want to be able to experience lots of different workplaces. They want to know what the cultural differences are between different types of employers. They want to know what it would be like to be a person working in that organisation. And I would genuinely challenge anybody who thinks you can achieve that by going back to your primary school for a week in year 10. I think that there is some value potentially in doing that, but it's certainly not what young people are asking for their futures. I think the vast majority of those young people that go back to their primary school in year 10 have already know that they don't want to be a teacher. They already know that they don't want to work within the education system. So it becomes negligible, the value that's being achieved from the purpose of the placement overall. So next slide, please. So Gatsby, in the Gatsby benchmarks, Gatsby have outlined for schools what they expect meaningful experiences of workplaces to look like. And this slide very much talks to Lauren's point about preparation and reflection on workplace experiences moving forward. This essentially is the guidance that will formalise that process for schools. And schools won't be able to record their progress against work experience targets without meeting these criteria, essentially moving forward. So really, Gatsby have laid out a very explicit set of definitions which would mean that workplace experiences are meaningful. And when we're thinking about young people accessing 10 days worth of experiences, then all of those experiences will need to be meaningful in order to count towards that guarantee moving forwards. Now, it's entirely up to you as employers and, of course, schools, how you think about 10 days. What does 10 days mean? It could mean 2 weeks, or it could mean 2 weeks broken down into 10 separate days, or indeed it could mean 20 half-day school sessions, or you could translate that down to a micro level and say, well, 2 weeks worth of experiences equals 50 hours worth of learning time. So you may be an employer who can offer a small group visit, 6 children accompanied by a teacher to your workplace for 1 hour. That would count towards a young person's entitlement, provided we're thinking about that setup of that being meaningful across the board. So quite a lot of detail in the meaningful definitions, but this is really for guidance for schools to work towards. Next slide, please. So the solution, we believe, to facilitating modern work experience and to raising the standards, raising expectations, raising quality and closing gaps for young people is something which we're calling the EqualX framework. So this is a framework of structured learning outcomes which will raise the bar when it comes to what young people are actually learning on their work experience. It will offer a multi-year, multi-experience model supported by the curriculum and accessible to all learners. This work is being tested out at the moment across multiple different institutions, including SEND institutions, alternative provision, and other educational settings. And we've developed a tiered approach, very simple in its structure, which will offer young people the opportunity to gain breadth of experiences, but also deep experiences where their own interests allow them to do that. So next slide, please. So essentially, this is, I think my graphics have gone a bit wayward, but anyway, this is normally a pyramid on this slide. So the apply and demonstrate being at the top of the pyramid and introduce and inspire being at the bottom of the pyramid. So what we're hoping, essentially, over a 5-year educational journey, young people will experience a blend of all of these types of tiers of workplace experiences. So some of them will be short, snappy, multiple in volume, but giving young people an insight into multiple different workplaces. But other experiences may well be project driven and deeper and underpinned by learning outcomes. Next slide, please. So why should we take a progressive approach? If we have a look at a traditional model here, you can see at the top, the 2 purple blobs are essentially what traditional work experience looks like. Some young people get 1 week in year 10, as we've heard today already. If you're then really lucky, you might get another week in year 12, but that certainly has not got universal coverage at all, depending on what programmes may be studied by young people at all. By taking a progressive approach of multiple layers, we can spread those experiences across those tiers that I just described and across every single year group, so that a young person is getting much more exposure to what the world of work can actually offer them across every year of their institution. We expect, and the definitions set out by the government expect, that the further a young person gets through their educational journey, the more in-depth and in tune with a young person's interest these experiences become. That still doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a block placement. We might find that a young person narrows down their options so that across year 10 and year 11 undertakes 3 different placements, but they're just 1 day each. It doesn't actually take a week to inspire a young person. It can take minutes in the right environment. So we need to capitalise that layered opportunity and give them those chances to make comparisons. Next slide, please. So this is the set of learning outcomes that have been designed by my colleagues at the Careers and Enterprise Company. There is, of course, a set of detail that sits beneath this, because that's the detail that educationalists will work towards. But the real plan is that young people take ownership of these learning outcomes. And as they move all the way through school from year 7 to 11, they're able to reflect and record their progress against these learning outcomes based on the multiple experiences that they will have of the workplace. And then the ambition, of course, then is that as young people are reflecting, planning, progressing, reflecting, they're starting to tune their own skill set, and their own skill set that's specific to them. They will then have a reflective portfolio of what they have undertaken on workplace experiences, which over time should be able to translate into more meaningful conversations with employers when young people are thinking about transitioning into the workplace, or indeed further in higher education, depending on what their own particular progression choices are. So next slide, please. And so really, what's in it for employers? So what's in it for employers are several things, of course. At the start of this call, I said that the real opportunity here is about flexibility. Flexibility for employers to contribute to suit your organisation, to suit the resources that you have available, and to suit how you might want to inspire young people about your workplace. There is no silver bullet for work experience that says this is the way to do it. But some of the things that we know that you can achieve essentially are opportunities to engage your future talent pipeline. Really think about helping young people understand how your industry relates back to what they're learning in the curriculum and in their particular lessons, how they start to apply skills and knowledge in the workplace, so that ultimately you are contributing to developing an employable workforce. And then really, and most importantly, helping young people to be able to make informed decisions, develop their own career readiness, and ultimately over time, that at scale will lead to closing skills gaps, because we will be able to match talent to opportunity. So really fantastic opportunities to think about why this could work for you as an organisation individually. Next slide, please. So this is an example. There's a lot of information on this slide, but you will have the slides sent to you as a consequence of registering for this particular webinar. This is a slide which summarises what we want Sam to achieve by the end of year 11. And we want Sam to have a set of knowledge, skills, behaviours that contribute to being a great employee of the future. A really defined, well-rounded set of employability skills and knowledge that will help Sam be able to make great choices about where their future career wants to be. So at the end of year 11, we want Sam to really understand the pathways and opportunities that are available to them. Young people do that best by seeing them and by hearing from you guys face to face with employers and really getting to know and understand what your industries can offer. We want Sam to be able to realise their own potential, really, really important, to remove those glass ceilings and look beyond what's immediately in front of you in your own school institution. Importantly, to see the relevance of curriculum to the workplace. I can't underestimate, and this is a lofty ambition on my part, but I can't underestimate the power of really good quality workplace experiences in re-engaging young people with education, really helping them to believe and understand why going to school is important and why we should do certain subjects. That comes alive when young people are exposed to you guys. That's the reality of the school system. We want Sam to have agency in their own skills development, to improve their own career readiness, and most critically, have a line of sight to the future. And I think that's my last slide, Lauren. Indeed, it is. So I just want to say thank you for listening to me. Of course, the conversation continues for a little bit longer this afternoon, and through the chat and otherwise, I'm really happy to answer the questions that I can. But of course, we need to remember what I started with, that this is ambition, not yet policy, and the insight that we gain from these calls and working with employers on pilots and working with schools on testing out this model is helping to inform that policy for the way forward. So back to you, Lauren.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Nicola. I've taken the slide down just for a second so we can tackle some questions. I do have some, but I'd love to tackle Maisie's in the chat just first, related to under 16-year-olds doing work experience, because I know this is a big, we hear this a lot, and I see it a lot from sort of career leaders and employers too, but I don't know, I'm not sure how necessarily true it is. Nicola, do you have sort of some myths to bust on under 16s not being able to do it?
Yeah, of course. So there's under 16s can do work experience. It's as simple as that. Basically, there is no rules that say under 16s can't do it. There's guidance set out by the Health and Safety Executive. There's all sorts of support tools and guidance that are available for employers to help navigate taking young people in. What, however, though, is not a myth is the reality that the concept of taking an under 16 young person into your workplace for a week can be quite terrifying. We spoke at the beginning about how terrifying that is for a young person. It's also really terrifying for many employers, because what do you do with that young person for a week while they're with you, frankly? Often pre-16 work experience is seen as some kind of babysitting exercise, not particularly productive for either party. It can have incredible value, of course. You know, I'm coming at this from a kind of why should we do it differently angle, but it can have incredible value. But I think if you think about the model that I've just presented to you, where we break work experience up into smaller pieces and fragments, it starts to take away actually many of the challenges that exist conceptually with traditional block placement models. So I can give you a couple of examples of how I've seen that working in schools around the country. I went to a school recently, a boys' school in the northwest of England, and they had never offered work experience for the last 20 years for their learners in year 10. It just wasn't something that they felt able to do. This year, they've completely reconstructed how their year 10 students access the workplace. And at the start of the year, they created a menu of multiple different employers, most, to be fair, probably parents from that school, but multiple different employers who put their hat in the ring and said, we can host a small group of students into our business for 2 hours and we'll do it 4 times across the course of the year. So we can take 4 different groups. The school then asked the students to select 4 employers from the list, and some of them picked 4 from the same sector because they had a rough idea about what they wanted to do. I know a young man who picked 4 different types of engineering because he was pretty clear that he wanted to be an engineer, just had no idea about the nuances of the different routes and pathways. Some young people picked a complete range across multiple different sectors because they weren't ready to make that decision yet. And the school facilitated those learners going out in small groups of 10, 15 is optimum for a minibus always, but facilitated small groups with a member of staff and took them 4 times across the year to visit different employers, to see those workplaces, to ask questions, to undertake a conversation, to do some prep before they went, and to reflect on that when they got back. So those learners in a whole year group, over 200 students, all experienced 4 different workplaces through a very simple trip mechanism. Now, of course, there are challenges. Everybody can always tell me what the challenges are. There's the logistics of the transport, and there's the cost of the transport, and enough staff to accompany children, etc., etc., etc. But in principle, those young people a year ago wouldn't have experienced any workplace experience, any workplaces at all, and yet they got 4 really good quality conversations. That's just one example of many. We're testing across the country through careers hubs multiple different approaches to this playing out at the moment, and also testing with 5 multi-academy trusts the types of curriculum development that needs to happen in order to facilitate the 2 coming together. So an absolute kind of myth that young people can't go into the workplace under the age of 16, but we do need to be more creative about how we think about how they do it.
And a brilliant moment to just think about the careers hubs and coordinators within those schools too, who can perhaps help facilitate some of the conversation around that in schools environments.
Of course, yeah. And so as from this next financial year as well, careers hubs will start to have a dedicated role within them around work experience coordination. So really facilitating those conversations with employers and starting to match experiences through to the curriculum development models that schools have been working on as well. But of course, remember, this is a long game. We're on a marathon here, not a sprint, that's for sure.
We do want to change it all overnight. And perhaps similar maybe in the answer, but I was keen to understand more about guidance and information around SMEs. I know Laura in the chat is keen too. And there are some trials around SMEs and how this is working. Can you tell us anything about that, Nicola?
Yes, there are. So we've got 2 pilots in particular at the moment, one with West Midlands Combined Authority and one with Liverpool City Region. And they are working with an agency at the moment to develop bespoke campaigns for those regions to engage and work with the SME community to tackle some of the challenges and barriers in relation to opening doors to young people in SMEs, but also to share best practice amongst the SME community to think about how they may be able to engage individually with workplace experiences. And again, we will have lots of examples that start to become published very soon about creative ways in which organisations have worked together in order to offer experiences. So we have an example that's being piloted at the moment, being led by KPMG, and KPMG are being a host industry, and they are convening multiple members of their supply chain so that over the course of a week, a young person that goes into a placement with KPMG is not just experiencing them as an employer, they're experiencing 5 other employers as part of their supply chain along the way. I heard another brilliant SME example this week where one of the co-working spaces in London, one of the office group, had opened up in two separate weeks one of their office group locations to learners who were studying for examinations. So the learners were being accompanied by their teacher to the location, using the inspirational environment as a revision setting. But whilst they were there, at lunch times and after school, they were facilitating workplace experiences with the tenants of the co-working space. So young people getting great revision opportunity, brilliant learning environment, but at the same time meeting multiple employers to break their day up and understand how those micro enterprises in many cases were actually building their businesses from those locations. So just some really creative approaches to how you can engage with this agenda without going back to the I can't host a young person for a week on a placement.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just reflecting on that too. I think that the model is brilliant when we think about the known issues and we think about SMEs when we had that supply and demand challenge of all year 10s need it in the same week because we're sending year 10 out in exam week because everybody, like the year 11 are doing their GCSEs. It feels like this model will shift the landscape from that perspective too. So what the guidance will be, so the guidance is for schools and those learning environments to undertake it, and what we are talking about is how employers can make an opportunity of that too, to reconsider and redesign how they are engaging. So schools will be required, is that the right word, Nicola? Schools will be required
yes, absolutely.
to deliver work experience in this different way, and as employers we are able to engage with that. So from my mind, and I can see the conversations in the chat, so from my mind then it should make it easier for SMEs, because actually if what you're asking me is for a couple of hours instead of a full week as an SME, I am more likely to be able to engage and perhaps as a small local business actually engage with 3 other businesses in the region that I didn't know about either.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can't really emphasize enough that opportunity for flexibility. And I think there's 2 ways of looking at the flexibility perspective. I think from the angle of employer pipeline and the opportunity for employers to really drive different behaviours in the school community. I think some of the feedback that I take from employers on a very consistent basis is we don't actually want or are able to deliver what's being asked of us. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2, great, but actually that week in March, terrible for my organisation. Really, we can't respond to that particular request. There's always the issue of how do you find 200 placements in the same week across the course of the year? So I think all of these different layers are we can start to unpeel them, start to unpeel the onion to say, actually, where's the heart of that works for me as an individual? And how can I then contribute, if I'm willing to this agenda by working with organisations like YE UK, by working with your local careers hubs and your local strategic authorities, whatever format they are composed of, to say, we're really interested in contributing to this, but this is how it's got to work for me. I'm calling the shots because it's my business ultimately. And I think that's a really important message that comes from all of this. It's not one size fits all. And your employees of the future are not one size fits all at all either. And I think there is questions in the chat about how do you facilitate flexibility if young people are going out at different times of the year. And that's a question that's been asked of me a lot, of course. The answer to that is a really straightforward one. It's about the construction of the curriculum. And that can't be done by a careers leader in isolation. That has to be done with education leaders, curriculum designers, deputy heads, and curriculum leaders in mind. But most importantly, in your school, I know that most of you have already got interactions with employers all the way through your curriculum models. They're just not mapped out in this way. And that's really where you should start thinking about what you already have and thinking about what you might need to fill gaps in the future moving forward. I think there are so many different opportunities that I could explain today, but of course we would absolutely run out of time very quickly. But we've got there are 5 multi-academy trusts at the moment, and they have designed between them 10 different curriculum models for how this could work. And that, of course, is transcending into hundreds of ways in which employers can then help those schools fulfill those curriculum models. And then when the planning is brought together and the employers and the curriculum planners come into the same room, then we see real magic happen in terms of how the opportunities start to become very real for young people.
Absolutely, and I think there's definitely something to pick up, and perhaps offline, Louise. I think all of your comments are really valid, and we have a mixture of participants on the call today. We have some careers hubs, we have employers, and some of those working across the education space. So actually, we have lots of people all in the same room. Some have come because they know Employment UK, and some come because Nicola is so wonderful talking about work experience and the drive and the move forward. So, but I think for the employers in the room, hearing often how frustrating it is to be a busy teacher in a school environment, and how actually kind of flexibility could open up to. We also work really closely with the Careers and Enterprise Company on both the employer standards and our work across the Good UK Employment Benchmark. And actually, there are probably some employer guides on how we could open up that access to work experience if we are going to do this and do this well, which I know if you're behind it, Nicola, we will. But actually, there will be guidance and support and continued links across both organisations to drive more engagement. It won't just be about teachers having to do this. Actually, the opportunity for employers to welcome more young people into their environment is very much what we will tackle across both of our work too. There is that moment to bring it together.
And of course, we're very cognizant of the fact that there is administrative burden on both sides, and there are challenges for employers. They're present in the chat today, of course, and there are also challenges and administrative challenges and burdens for schools as well. Aside from the kind of conceptual model that I've been talking to you about today, there is a significant piece of work happening in the background on behalf of and with the government to really understand how to iron out some of those barriers and how to make and facilitate this work easier for all parties. And in the case of this particular call, that will without doubt manifest itself in support and guidance for employers, and there will 100% be opportunities for us organisationally to work together as well.
Wow. And as we close, then final question, Nicola, you'll be relieved in terms of getting started. One thing employers can do in the room, what's the first thing they can do as an employer of any size?
So the first step for me would be pick up the phone, either to an organisation like YE UK, who can certainly give support and make connections either to us or to other organisations that can help, or pick up the phone to your local careers hub and ask your local careers hub for a conversation about how you might be involved in learning more about modern work experience overall. They will be able to tell you what that is starting to look like within their local area. But individually, for you as an organisation, think about what type of thing would be right for you. There will be colleagues on the call today who are offering incredible programmes of work experience. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind about that at all. And they will be delivering programmes that work and work well. I would be thinking about that pyramid. The diagram that went wrong on my slide, when that comes to you in the slide deck, will look like a pyramid.
Yes, we'll make sure it looks right.
Start thinking about your organisation through the lens of, where do you think your offer fits on that pyramid? Is it something that you could do an hour here, half a day there, in partnership with another organisation? Or are you offering something that is already deeper, or you have got applied learning projects that are fit for purpose for students that are much further down their decision-making processes when it comes to the types of experiences they want to explore? If we get that tiering right over time across the country, ultimately the learners that do come to you for more extended experiences will be the right ones. They'll be sat in front of you because they've chosen to be in that place because it marries with their interests across the board. Now, of course, that's a huge task logistically. It's certainly not going to happen overnight, but what we're doing now is laying the foundations, and from little acorns grow great oak trees. And I am absolutely sure that by the end of this parliamentary term, collectively, we can have made huge strides forwards within this policy arena. but all be thinking about it through the lens of what works for me.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nicola. In terms of the time, we are running slightly short, but I know it's important that we have that conversation. So there's a few things I want to cover, and we'll probably cover them faster than most people would suggest. We are running a series of work experience webinars and programs too. We'll make sure that you get the links to come and join us to talk about protected groups, to connect and discuss how as an employer we can make work experience work and lead some of that. And we are also ramping up for Youth Employment Week. I will also make a final plug for the Youth Voice Census. Our data, knowledge, insight, our understanding of where young people are at right now comes from the Youth Voice Census. It is open until the 6th of June. It captures the views, opinions and experiences of 11 to 30-year-olds across the UK, those in education, those in work, and everybody in between. Please do share it out across your networks. Over 5,000 young people completed it last year. We're at 3,000 this year with a month to go. It's a really important moment that, one, we see where young people are at right now, but also we see where it's working, where the employers young people are working for are making a difference, where education is changing for young people, and which regions and parts of the UK are doing things differently and doing things really well. For anyone that is not a member of Youth Employment UK, we will share out with you. Our membership team will be in the chat and no doubt reach out to those employers in the room too, to talk about the recognition you gain, the support to best practice, insight, intelligence, events and awards that we're able to offer. I wanted to just briefly mention Haven as an example. We have really recently completed a case study with the Careers and Enterprise Company on our work with Haven too. They are a really great example of working with young people in schools from a social mobility perspective in the first range. Actually, what they've been doing in some of their seaside towns and in Blackpool and Filey, they have been bringing their chefs into the school environment, one, to ensure young people are learning about nutrition and food and dietary requirements that they might have, that they are able to prepare fresh food, or be able to prepare fresh vegetables. And actually, as a group, they've created meals for their local community and local homeless people. But actually what that programme builds into then, in terms of Haven are coming to the school, so they are taking out some of those worries and frustrations schools can often have with getting sign-off, getting agreements, signing forms, what's seen as red tape. Actually, they're going into schools and bringing some of those learning environments there. And then there is virtual work experience to make those young people feel confident, to ingratiate young people into who Haven are and what they do. Then it's followed up with an in-person work experience. And what they are developing next is an apprenticeship programme that those who complete work experience can, if they choose to, apply for, be guaranteed interviews for, and develop further from that too. Youth Employment UK offer a range of services that will help and support you to be able to do that and do that really well. From getting started, it is about understanding where you are, auditing your current work with tools like the Good Youth Employment Benchmark and the Careers and Enterprise Company's employer standards. What we learned from the benchmark last year, though, was a lot around keeping a connection to young people. Only 8% are keeping in contact. Only 23% are even asking any feedback for how young people engaged with that work experience programme. What could have been better? Could it have been longer? Could it have been shorter? Very few employers are actually designing and delivering based on what we hear from young people. They have this moment with young people on site to ask about what their ambitions are, to ask about what skills they want to develop, to ask what good work experience can mean for them. And we aren't making the most of it. Sometimes that's because we haven't set any learning outcomes to start with. We can really help and support in terms of your evidence and evaluation needs. But for a lot of the employers we work with. Sometimes it's prepared and supplied. Things like work experience at early careers exploration is provided by a third party, and actually for a lot of employers it is about understanding with our support what questions they can ask, how they can feed in what they do know better to deliver better outcomes. So I'll finish there, just slightly over time here at Youth Employment UK, but with one final thanks to Nicola Hall from the Careers and Enterprise Company. As we have said, this recording will be made available with the links, with the slides, and with any other materials we have suggested. If you have asked a question that we haven't been able to answer, the team will come back to you across the next couple of days with, if we can answer, we will be able to do that for you, and if not, we'll send you to the very best place. So thank you very much for joining, and have a good rest of your day.